Greetings, brothers. Thanks for being here. It's been a little while since we were able to break down a Blood Angels tournament winning list. You know I have tried a couple of times and failed. So I've got one here from the Game Night 40k GT in Canada that just happened like last weekend. So let's get straight into the list. So a big shout out first to Sam Procopio, who did place first, obviously, at this tournament. He scored 87 points minimum in every single game, and this was a tournament that took place in London, Canada, and it was a Game Night 40k GT with 33 players at the tournament. So here's a score, 4.5 wins. And he scored 87 in every game. Notably, he got 93 in one game and 100 in another game. So this was pretty high battle points. I mean, he was 21 points ahead of second place. And we are going to look at some of the battles that he played and the enemies that he did beat against as we go through. However, we're going to start with his army list. So let's get into the list. So as we look at the list, it's important to note he's a battalion detachment, 2 additional relics of the chapter. We start with HQs. So we've got that chapter master who's running Soul Warden for a 6-inch bubble of 5+ against mortal wounds. He has also got a mastercrafted bolt gun and a relic blade. He has Rights of War, which means core and characters within 6 are granted obsec. And he's got Visage of Death, so enemy models within 3 lose obsec. So pretty interesting chapter master in that he's going to help you flip some objectives, and also he's going to do a decent amount of damage with that relic blade and also provides bonus survivability to whoever he's round. We then have our Primaris Chaplain on the bike, who is running Artisan of War and Mantra of Strength, and he has the Canticle of Hate. So basically, we're able to give him +1 strength, +1 attack, +1 damage, so you can get that 3 damage Crozius. We also have Canticle of Hate to make it easier to make charges. We have Adamantium Mantle, so this character has a 5+ shrug against all damage. Master of Sanctity means 2 litanies per turn. And then also Armor Indomitus gives him that 2+ save, the ability to have the 3+ invulnerable save, and an additional wound. So Primaris Chaplain on the bike in this situation is on like 8 wounds on a 2+ save. 1 time per game you can have that 3+ invuln. And the great thing about Armor Indomitus, I've said this a bunch of times, is that you do not have to activate the Armor Indomitus until you know how many saves you need to make. So unlike something like Transhuman where you have to play it earlier in the phase, but as you get targeted with Armor Indomitus you can wait till you know how many saves you need to make. So really powerful chaplain on a bike, and a great character for using Angel Sacrifice on. So any big enemy model, I mean, it's going to struggle to get through 8 wounds on a 3+ invuln with a 5+ shrug. It doesn't really matter what enemy it is. Angel Sacrifice is going to give you a lot of value here. We then have a Sanguinary Priest. He's the Chief Apothecary, so that means he's healing 2 units for 3 wounds every turn. And I mean, if you've got those tanky chaplain on a bike, you might want to throw 3 wounds back on him. He is the Selfless Healer, and he also runs Teeth of Terra. And I think Teeth of Terra is the best pick on this Sanguinary Priest. And my reasoning really behind that is that the Sanguinary Priest should only be in combat when you decide he's ready to go in combat, and giving him Teeth of Terra gives him like 8 attacks in turn 3, because I think he has 3 attacks base, 3 more from the Teeth of Terra, potentially 2 more from charging once you hit turn 3, and he does have a weapon skill of 2+, so you are going to get 8 strength, 5 -3 if it's turn 3, -2 beforehand, 2 damage attacks. So I mean, he's kind of an infantry grinder. So I think this is the best way to run the Sanguinary Priest. Keep him defensively for a couple of turns and then try and get him into combat later in the game. Troop-wise, we got 1 squad of Assault Intercessors, we got 1 squad of Incursors, and a squad of Intercessors with the auto bolt rifles. Now, personally, I think Incursors are stronger, and I think they're going to be the strongest as we go into the new Chapter 2022, Chapter Approved 2022 rules. But right now, this is fine. Auto bolt rifle and Intercessors will do a bit of damage, and Incursors gives you that option to get the Retrieve Octarius data, but this list isn't actually going to struggle with that, because as we go through the list, you'll see he basically has 9 ways, or 9 units, that can score Retrieve Octarius data. So only having 1 squad of Incursors in this list is actually fine. Elites, we've got a 5-man Death Company, and 3 of these have Thunderhammers. And I talked to Sam, and he said in every single game he did use Forlorn Fury on these to threaten and push forward and kind of maybe even box the enemy into their deployment zone a little bit. We then have a Relic Contemptor with the Twin Volkites. There's no surprises there. Everybody knows how strong these are right now. We see a lot of Space Marine players at top tables running multiple Relic Contemptors with the Twin Volkites. Get them while you can, because I think they will go up 5 points per model in the near future. We then have 2 squads of Sangre Guard. One has all axes and one has all swords, and I think in an ideal world now you'd probably run like 5 axes, 2 swords per squad, and I think that just there's so much more toughness 5 stuff around, and the -2 from the axes most often pushes enemies onto their invulnerable saves anyway, so that's probably how I would prefer to run Sangre Guard right now, but I still think axes and swords, they're both good options. They're both solid damage dealers, and we actually have a squad of scouts here. So the sergeant has a chainsword, and the other scouts have combat knives. And this is something that we don't see very often, but there's a very clear reason for it in this list. Fast attack wise, we have Plasma Inceptors, and Plasma Inceptors, they are 60 points a model. They are very expensive, but they do inflict serious hurt, and if you land them near your Chapter Master and you can reroll ones, then there's a very good reason to include Plasma Inceptors. Heavy support wise, we've got 2 squads of Eliminators with Instigator Bolt Carbine, and I've ran the Eliminators with the Las Fusils before, and I kind of like them. They're basically Las cannons, 36 inches, strength 8, -3, so maybe not quite Las cannons, but still decent. And the nice thing about them is a flat 3 damage. Space Marines are actually struggling for weapons that are like flat 3 damage. I run Redemptors for their plasma cannons with a flat 3 damage, but Eliminators are a good way to get them as well, and they do have a BS of 2+. And with the Instigator Bolt Carbine, you have a little bit of lookout Sir threat as well, because the Instigator Bolt Carbine is a 2 damage, strength 4 -1 rifle that has 24 inches, and it's also pretty good because if you have the Instigator Bolt Carbine, your Eliminators can essentially move 6 inches, shoot, and then move another 6 inches. So you can pop in and out of cover, shooting their Las Fusils on a 3+, or you can use these guys to help you score stuff like Engage on All Fronts, Relentless Assault, and Retrieve Octarius Data. I think Eliminators with Las Fusils are I think they're decent. I think he's kind of proved that they're decent by this tournament result. And then finally we've got Landspeeder Storm, and that squad of scouts will be starting in the Landspeeder Storm. Landspeeder Storm has 9 wounds. It's only got a 4-up save, but it's also kind of a tricky thing for enemies to deal with, because you don't really want to focus fire on a Landspeeder Storm. It really doesn't do very much damage, but in this list is designed to help get 2 units, essentially the Landspeeder Storm and the Scouts, into the enemy deployment zone very quickly to start scoring Relentless Assault. So here's a picture of his army. You can see the 3 troops, the Death Company, the 2 Sanguinary Guards, the Inceptors, the Contemptor, the 3 HQs, and the Landspeeder and the Scouts. And his path to victory was an 88-point victory against Thousand Suns, a 93 points victory against Renegade Knights, which included 14 Armigers, a win of 100 points versus the Grey Knights, which I'm very impressed about because I failed against Grey Knights on the final table at the recent tournament I was at, a draw against Orcs, 87 points, and I mean, Orcs are a strong army right now, and they have a lot of tools and they have a lot of power, obviously one of the newest codexes, and then an 87-point win against Aldari Soup was his final victory for the tournament. So as with these tournament lists, I like to break them down and just tell you guys what I'm thinking, and I've mentioned a few points already. So the Chapter Master obviously is granting and removing OBSEC, which used right can be a very strong tool. Sometimes you can win and lose games in tournament by a single objective flip. You gain 5 points, enemy loses 5 points. So this is one of the things this Chapter Master is going to provide you with. Obviously, if he's running with 14 Sanguinary Guard as well, 2 squads of 7, there's a lot of threat there and there's a lot of damage coming out from that squad. Especially if you can ever flood an objective with 7 Sanguinary Guard that are OBSEC and remove OBSEC from your enemy opponent. The 3 troop choices help us perform actions, and obviously we have those 3 strong jump pack units, and I do like 3 jump pack units in a Blood Angels army list. Be it 1 Sanguinary Guard, 1 Death Company, 1 Vanguard Veterans, or a bit of a mix of both, but 3 seem to be a good number. He also has the Death Company, 3 Thunder Hammers, which he's going to Forlorn Fury every game. And I guess the advantage of having both a Chapter Master and a Sanguinary Priest means you can put them in Assault Doctor and you can give them Chapter Master rerolls and you can threaten a turn 1 charge, which I guess if used right can be a very powerful tool. Fire support. So I always talk about trying to have like 500 points in your list for fire support, just because I think in 9th edition you need to balance, you need to have some sort of fire support threat to sort of keep us in the game for a couple of turns while our jump units get in combat. Now he has 100% done this with 500 points of fire support exactly. Eliminators times 2 were 170 points. The Plasma Inceptors were 180, that's 350, and then add on the Volcon for another 150 to put us at 500 points exactly. And then Scepters are going to begin in reserve. That's the only unit he's going to put in reserve, and the Scouts are going to be in the Land Speeder, and this is to basically flood the enemy deployment zone. We have the Selfless Healer with the Teeth of Terror to grind enemy infantry, and then we have the highly survivable Chaplain, which we can use for Angel Sacrifice. He doesn't have too much to hold the backfield. I guess maybe like the Squad of Incursors can start out there, and then we can guerrilla tactics them forward a little bit further into the game. But he hasn't really worried about holding the backfield. Sometimes it's important to have something in your list, but I think what's interesting as we get into the strength and weaknesses, this list was designed similar to my tournament list, where like he'd almost designed the list around 3 distinct secondaries. So I designed my tournament list around 2, which were Oath of Moment and Retrieve Victorious Data. Sam here had designed his around 3, which was Oath of Moment, Retrieve Victorious Data, and Relentless Assault. And Relentless Assault is a very powerful one that can score you a lot of points if you can get into the opponent deployment zone and be able to stay there. On some maps that can be very difficult, but if you can do it, if you do it a couple of turns, even 3 turns, it's 12 victory points. It is a very quick, it does rack up very quickly if you can score Relentless Assault points. So let's talk about strengths of this list. So he's a strong melee threat. I also looked through all his units and worked out that he has 10 3 or more damage weapons. And I think 3 or more damage weapons are very important if you come up against any sort of army that has -1 damage, like Death Guard, or you come up against a lot of Dreadnoughts. They're going to negate 2 damage weapons pretty heavily, so 10 3 damage more weapons is actually a really nice number. I usually recommend around 10. He has 2 bubbles of protection against mortal wounds, and I guess that would have helped against the Grey Knights, and it will just help against any other faction that can do consistent mortal wounds. Orcs can do it, I guess Volcon Contemptors can do it. So I run Soul Warden, but he's running Soul Warden and a Selfless Healer, so that kind of gives him 2 bubbles of protection against mortal wounds, and obviously he's got that strong OBSEC presence and denial. 9 units in this list can perform actions. It would be the 3 troop choices, the 2 eliminators, the scouts, the 2 Sanguinary Guard, and the Inceptors. So in terms of like, sometimes when I talk about scoring points from Retrieve Victorious Data, we want like 4 or 5 units that potentially perform data. Well, he has 9, so most games I would imagine he's scoring maximum points in data. I guess that's going to change a bit with Chapter Approved 2022, but right now it seems very strong. And this list was definitely designed around getting the 3 secondaries scored consistently, and one of the secondaries, Relentless Assault, requires you to have more units in the enemy deployment than yours. Well, he's got that Land Speeder and the Scouts that can get in there very quickly, along with the Forlorn Fury Death Company, along with Deep Striking Scepters, so that can be very effective. Oath of Moment requires a unit to be in the middle of the board, while the Death Company, if they don't go first, they could Forlorn Fury towards the middle of the board and maybe chill in a concealed position, so that you can put a bit of threat and threaten that sort of turn 1 charge still. And then Octavius Data, we just talked about how effective his list is going to be against doing that. There's some weaknesses to this list, right? So there's no way to prevent Overwatch, so if you want to prevent Overwatch, you're going to have to be smart, try and charge from an obscuring position. He has no Psyker, so there is no denies, but, the Chaplain on the bike, the Chapter Master with the bubble of mortal wound protection, it's probably not the biggest deal to have no Psyker. I run a Psyker in my list, but I think that the Chaplain or the Psyker are probably kind of interchangeable. A Chaplain, as he's built him, is about 140 points. A Chief Librarian with, Null Zone and Psychic Fortress and that sort of stuff is also around 140 points. So I think you can go both ways. I think the nice thing about going the way that he's gone with the chaplain and having that sort of 8 wound really survivable character is if the enemy do engage on the 8 wound character and they don't kill him, maybe they take half his wounds away, it is very easy for the selfless healer to get in range with his 12-inch move and potentially another 7 inches from an advance, and obviously the bite character can move 14 inches as well. So these two characters could actually be like 35 inches apart, and you still be able to get together and heal them back up in the following turn. So that's pretty nice. But there is no fight last in this list. Now, I think not having a fight last is not the end of the world. Sometimes having fight last can give you a very big advantage, but if you don't have it, if you have a survivable character, like we just talked about, that you can angel sacrifice on, and you can do that in the right phase of the turn, or the right order within the turn, so when the enemy do get to attack, all their attacks have to go into a character that they can't kill, then no fight last can actually it can be less important. So, as I was looking at this list, a lot of things made sense. It's quite a lot, it's a little bit different from other Blood Angels lists that have won tournaments, but I think it's been pretty well designed, and I think he's obviously done very well to win a GT, 33 players in the armies he played against, 2 of which were very psychic armies, Thousand Suns and Grey Knights. Probably the protection against mortal wounds would have helped no end there. So I think this was a well thought out army. But what I really like about this army is it feels balanced, and I think that balanced is the way to push forward in 9th edition. All melee lists can have merit and strength, but we haven't seen an all melee list, I think, win a GT now this year for Blood Angels, where we have seen multiple lists that mix the shooting and the combat and have done a good job of that. I think Junior's won 2, and I think Sam has won 1 now. So I think 3 GTs have been won by Blood Angels, but all of them have done this sort of balanced approach. So I think balanced approach is good. I know some of you guys love the close combat style and all close combat, and I think if you want to do that, more power to you. I think that's something we haven't seen, though. I wonder if someone could run a full close combat army with just the whirlwind in it, because that gives you that fight last, and that means if you're making like shitloads of charges in the same turn, it gives you a little bit more freedom to charge indiscriminately, because you can pick multiple enemies to, you can manipulate the combat order a little bit better. So no one's run that yet, but no, I like this list a lot, and props to Sam for coming up with it. It seems unique. I don't think I've seen anybody else run this list. The only other person I've seen mention the scouts and the land speeder to flood into the enemy deployment zone was Highland Phoenix, but I don't think he's actually done it. He just thought it might be a good tactic, so Sam's obviously figured that out and has done it effectively. I'm then going to score it, because I always score people's lists when they come onto the channel and try and give them a score out of 50. Bear in mind, anything above 40 usually means it's a pretty good list. I think my tournament list maybe scored about 42, so it's hard to get a solid score across all the different categories, right? It makes something really strong, you have to have a weakness somewhere else. So OBSEC and Objective Holding, I've given him 9.5. He's got 3 troop units, including 1 Phobos unit. He's got Rites of War to add OBSEC, and he's got Visage of Death to remove it. That's about as strong as you can possibly be in terms of OBSEC. Against anti-horde infantry, I've said 8.5. I mean, he's got solid amounts of shooting, 20 and jealous bolter shots. Inceptors arriving, that's another 18 shots. The Volcon, that's 16 shots. He's got Chapter Masters in there letting us re-roll and giving the Sanguinary Guard hitting on 2s. So against like a horde-based list, he's in pretty good shape. Anti-vehicle monster effectiveness, I mean, all 3 jump pack units can deal very solid damage, backed up by pretty killy characters, that Relic Blade on the Chapter Master, the Teeth of Terra on the Sanguinary Priest, and the potential of 3 damage Crozius on the Chaplain. Las Fusils and Scepters, I mean, I think against enemy armor or monsters, he's got very good killing potential, 9.5. Mobility, so it's really a highly mobile list. There's very few static models. Comboing the fact with those eliminators actually going to get a 12-inch move due to the bolt carbines, then I think mobility is really high in this list as well, about 9 out of 10. And mobility is kind of Blood Angel's strongest suit, so if you have a really mobile list, then that can sort of help you win the games, so to speak. And then specialization, so I've taken a couple of points off specialization because there's no Psyker, there's no Fight Last, there's no Overwatch Denial, and these are tools that I like to use in my competitive lists, and I kind of feel they're missing, but who am I to say? I have not won a GT this edition, but Sam obviously has done. So congratulations, Sam. Thank you so much for messaging me and telling me about your victory, and also breaking down this list a little bit for me. And I'm going to score that at 44.5 out of 50. This is one of the highest. This is probably in all the lists I've scored, this is probably like a top 5. And a good unique list using units that we haven't seen so much: Landspeeder Storms, Las Fusel Eliminators, obviously the Volcon has come in there, and overall I think a very interesting and fun list. And I mean, you guys would do well to think about the fact that he has built a list to score 3 secondaries that require basically very little killing of the enemy. Oath of Moment, you have to do some killing, and you do get some points through Oath of Moment by killing enemies, but you're kind of going to have to kill some enemies anyway, so I wouldn't talk about Oath of Moment as an objective or a secondary that requires you to kill units. So my plan for the tournament, to make things easy for myself, was to pick 2 secondaries that I was always going to pick every game regardless, and I was going to get really good at scoring these 2 secondaries. Well, Sam has taken this one step further, and he has gone for 3 secondaries. He's always going to pick, or he's not always going to pick, but he said he picked them in most games. So he's got a plan to basically pick around 3 secondaries, and when you look at his scoring, 80 against Thousand Suns. I mean, Thousand Suns are very difficult to deal with right now. Everything in their army is obsec, nothing fills morale. It feels like they're a very good army. Knights may be a little bit lower on the sort of table and how strong they are, but 93 points is still very good. 100 points against the Grey Knights is amazing, because Grey Knights, I feel, are so strong right now. I really struggled against them, and that was with the ability to deny. So Sam didn't have any denies in this list, and he scored the full 100 points against Grey Knights. Orcs are a very strong faction right now. I mean, I beat Orcs at the tournament I was at, but I had a lot of experience playing Andrew's balanced Orcs, so I guess I don't know how much experience Sam had against Orcs, but Orcs are a very strong army. They have a lot of tricks, they have a lot of damage in melee, so an 87 point draw is still very respectable. And then the win against Aldari Soup, 87 points. So yeah, carried him to the 4-1, I guess 4-1-0. I don't actually, 4.5 wins. 4 wins, 1 draw, 0 losses, and recorded him. Someone else did the same, I guess. I guess it was the guy that he drew with, but then he won his final game by quite a lot more points. So, awesome. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope that gave you some food for thought on how you can build a balanced Blood Angels list, which I have been talking about for a very long time. I'm sure you're sick of hearing me talk about it. Thank you for watching. I am here usually every week, so if you would like to subscribe and see more Blood Angels content, please do that. If you enjoyed today's video, I'd love it if you leave it a like. I try and ask you to do all this stuff at the end. It isn't, you can get straight into the content of my videos. And then finally, if you're new and you want to support the channel, there's a link to Patreon down below, or you can click the big join button underneath this video on YouTube, and for the price of a cup of coffee every month you can support the channel. That is super appreciated. Thanks again for watching. As I said, I haven't got as much content coming out at the moment that I would like. My son and wife are both in hospital. We're hoping that they maybe get home in time for Christmas. I do not know that yet. Things are going well though, so thank you for all the positive messages that I've had, and hopefully I will catch most of you guys soon. Until next time, brothers, by the blood are we made strong. Peace.